always done that so far. So Scott, can you give us a quick introduction to who you are and how you come to be here, why you're talking about heroism today on Zoom?
Hi, my name is Scott Allison. I'm a professor of psychology at the University of Richmond, and I've studied heroes and heroism for about 12 years now, and have published some books and articles on the topic, and have been involved in previous roundtables, a few of them, and have been on the board of Phil Zimbardo's Heroic Imagination Project. And I'm here to talk about the psychology of heroism, and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
Elaine, how about you?
Hi everybody, I'm Elaine Kinsella. So I'm a lecturer and researcher in psychology at the University of Limerick in Ireland. I started my PhD in 2009 on the topic of heroism. So I'd worked in business before that as an organizational psychologist. So I'd been studying leadership for a while, but I was really interested in both the topics of leadership and heroism. So I've continued that journey through the PhD, and the research has continued, and I've published some papers on the topic. And this is my second Hero Roundtable. I think it was about 6 years ago in Flint, Michigan, which was fantastic.
With your first baby.
So, with my first baby, and here I am, 6 years later with another baby who's a similar age. So I seem to be on a similar schedule here.
Elaine, where did you publish your papers?
So I've published in the Journal of Social Psychology, so JPSB, Journal of Social Psychology and Personality, the other way around. There's obviously in Scott's journal, Heroism Science. I can send on a few.
Link.
So we published in a few different journals.
Yeah, send us a link. Thank you. That'd be great.
No problem.
And we seem to have lost Mariana. I'll keep checking to see if she comes back. And then Phil, who are you and why are you here?
Oh, I'm Phil Zimbardo. I am the founder and president of the Heroic Imagination Project, and I'm a hero in training. So I started my hero project actually a decade ago. So this would be our decade anniversary. And what's unique about our program is that I helped create, using social psychology and cognitive psychology and information that I've been teaching at Stanford for many years, lessons that are interactive. That is, one lesson is on the bystander effect, how to transform passive bystanders into active heroes. One is on mindset, how to transform static fixed mindsets into dynamic growth mindsets. And the third one is transforming prejudice and bias into understanding and acceptance of others. Each of these lessons could go for about 3 hours long, but they can be chunked into smaller pieces. And they have video, it's videos, but a lot of Q&A. It's especially, it's all engaging. So usually one way to do it is the teacher or the, now we're going into business as well. They're designed for high school and college, but some people now are beginning to use them for middle school and for businesses. So the leader of the group usually arranges the audience in pairs. And so when the leader asks a question, they sometimes say, share your ideas that, have you ever been in a situation where somebody needed your help and you helped? Then talk about how you did that. And then now, have you ever been in a situation where somebody needed your help and you didn't help? And now we also have booklets that they can also write, which is really better because they can take that home. So it's been very successful. It's unique. They're unique. I'm saying it's videos, it's Q&A, but all of it is involves new ways of presenting material. So all these lessons to say, what are the obstacles to achieving these goals? Here are the goals. And then it says, how do we transform an obstacle into a challenge? And how do we transform a challenge into a solution? So it's critical thinking skills at the heart of every lesson, presented in unique ways. And it's been very successful. All the follow-ups we've done show that not only they learn the material, they enjoy it. Typically, the last part of the lesson is, what are the two most interesting things you learned today that you would like to share with somebody? And then we say, who is it you want to share with? And they write down. And then we say, okay, now your last obligation is go share it. And
Right.
our lesson now is going globally. We're in, I think, 12 nations around the world.
Right, thank you. And then Mariana's back. So Mariana, can you tell us?
Sorry.
No problem. Tell us who you are and why you're here. What's the interest in heroism?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is, I'm sorry for my English. I will try to speak slowly and without a lot of mistakes. So I am from Portugal. I am a lecturer in the Catholic University of Porto. And I've been studying the connection of psychology with peace and human rights. I'm working a lot with the refugee population, for example. And I became very interested during my thesis on what leads to violence, and so I get to know the work of Phil, and so I became also very interested in trying to help in counteract violence, and so I was in contact with Phil in order to implement the heroic imagination.
Yes. Yay.
Here in Portugal, and so we are trying to first we did like a pilot study and try to adapt the sessions with secondary students, teenagers, and now last year. Actually, it finished 1 week before the quarantine. We were doing a joint project with the Red Cross, combining sessions of heroic imagination and then psychological first aid with the kids from 8 and 9 years old.
Wow.
So that's it.
Great. Scott, I want to jump into something you just published or wrote about recently, which is your idea that heroism's flipped at this time with the coronavirus. Can you talk us through what that was about?
Yeah, I wrote a Psychology Today piece just highlighting the strange circumstances that reinforce something that Phil and Zeno Franco have been saying for years, namely that the banality of heroism means that every one of us can be a hero. Heroism is available to all of us, and that is coming into sharp relief now that grocery store workers and truck drivers and food delivery people and people who are making minimum wage, who are now being identified as absolutely essential for the running of our society. And they're finally getting the props, the kudos, the recognition they deserve. So we've got all these unsung heroes, these everyday people that are stepping up and doing heroic work and putting themselves at risk by being out in public and being in contact with people. But we need them to stock the shelves of our grocery stores and to move things and people and goods and services around. And the second way that heroism has turned upside down is this whole idea that we can all be a hero just by sitting at home watching Netflix and not going out and contaminating people. So it's kind of an interesting situation that highlights what we've already known about heroism, namely that it's banal, that it's available to everyone, but also highlighting the role that everyone can play. The most average, ordinary person can make a difference right now by being sociocentric and staying at home, rather than going out and being egocentrically mingling in crowds.
Yeah,
Right.
so that's
Thank you.
unique, is that you can be a hero by doing nothing.
Exactly.
And we never thought about that. But it's doing nothing but following orders that make the world safer. So it's being a hero in almost in absentia.
It's
well put, Fred. Phil. Well put.
It's sacrificing, right? You're sacrificing some of the things that you want in order for the greater good to be. For everyone that's watching, if you've got any questions, just throw them in the chat, and I will.
Raquel is there.
Yep, we've got a lot of people. Elizabeth Heiner's just connecting.
I see. Okay.
So Elaine, I want to jump to you because my understanding is you're doing research right now on the heroic behavior that's happening through this. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I've teamed up with my colleague who's working at the University of Gloucestershire in the UK. So she's a health and stress expert. So I suppose just as Scott was talking about, so many people have been labelled heroes and are being brought to the forefront quite rightly as displaying many of the heroic characteristics that we've discussed for many years. They're really stepping up and helping us all to protecting us from the physical dangers of this particular virus, but also the psychological threats that this virus is showing us. So we've teamed up. So we're looking to recruit as many frontline workers across the UK and Ireland. Two countries that have adopted quite different socio-political strategies to dealing with the virus. So we're looking at the contextual factors between the two countries, but we're also looking at the different types of frontline workers. So I suppose some of the frontline workers have been trained to work under extreme pressure in emergency scenarios, but many of these frontline workers have not. So we're expecting to see quite significant differences on how these kind of working opportunities, these working conditions are impacting each of these frontline workers and how they're having to draw from their own resources in order to cope, and how this is actually going to impact on those people over the next few weeks and months and forever, however long this particular pandemic goes on for.
I've certainly noticed in the supermarket here in our tiny town, the stress that the staff are under, and as you say, they've got no training to deal with that. The managers are even, they haven't had a lot of training in leadership or dealing with stressful customers, and stressful customers is what they get pretty much every day.
And I'm sure they never imagined ever having to work under these particular circumstances. Right. And many of them don't have the right protective equipment, certainly here in Ireland. Even within the hospital settings, we're struggling to get enough PPE equipment. Lots of people are nodding, so I guess it's not just in Ireland, but certainly in the supermarkets and supply chain and logistics, lots of people don't have the right equipment. So they're actually sacrificing their physical health as well as everything else.
Yeah. Mariana, what's the work that you've done with refugees, and how has that been affected in the last few weeks or the last month?
It's very sad to talk about it, actually, because I was in Lesbos. It's an island in Greece where a lot of people will arrive from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, then coming from Turkey to ask for asylum in the European Union. So because there was no European solidarity with these people, they were being the European Union just made a deal with Turkey, and so all these people were stuck in this island in Greece in very, very bad shape. So we were trying to raise we were previously working there with a Portuguese NGO, and a lot of NGOs were there. But now, so you have thousands and thousands of people just living in these camps since the refugee crisis started, because no other countries were hosting them, and so they are really in really bad conditions. But now things are, of course, worse, because what happened is that they removed most of the NGOs that were there, and so we cannot even be there helping them. And now the virus is reaching the camps. Now you have some people there, and if we talk about the importance of being isolated and of social distance, these people just live 10 people in a very small tent, so they cannot do social distance at all. And so things will be very, very bad unless the other countries try to move these people out, but I think that won't happen. So it's a terrible situation.
Yeah. And what about the work that you were doing previously with them? It was around reducing violence, but how were you interacting with them? How were you able to get in front of them, and what were the messages you were trying to send to the refugees?
When we were there?
When you were working with them, yeah, with the Heroic Imagination Project? Or you didn't?
Well, the work with the refugees in the camps was not related with Heroic Imagination.
Okay.
But actually, in the last time, so we were giving like psychosocial support, medical support, so not related. But actually, last time that I was there, some of the volunteers were doing like a youth group, and concerning the promotion of for them to be leaders in the refugee camp and try to help the people that were living there. And I did a session on the Heroic Imagination. I talk about the work of Phil, and it was very inspirational for them. And so we were planning to in these with these youngsters to also do this there, but now we are not even there.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately.
Matt, let me mention something that I think you'll find interesting. I have a program in Palermo, Sicily, which is, I'm Sicilian, that's where my family comes from. And I go there every year. And I trained several women in how to deliver our lessons. And they found a small office actually in a ghetto in Palermo. It's, you know, it's unimaginable how poor those people are. Many of them live in houses with no windows because these used to be places to house animals. But in any event, what happened is 3 years ago, the Sicilian government, in comparison to the right-wing Italian government, put out an invitation to African youth in several nations that they would welcome them, you know, to come to Palermo, a limited number, I don't know, 100 or 200 men and boys and girls, ages 16 to I guess 18 or 19, to be educated in Italian, etc. And so the program was unique. They gave them housing, they gave them clothing, and then they gave them Italian education. And the people I worked with, Claudia Libero and Cristina Cirillo, got a number of these and started training them in our lessons as students. And then several of them became really excited about these lessons. And they've even formed a group among themselves with an African word, I think it's like brochere, which is sharing. And they make puzzles that they sell. They make puzzles and other things. But now what they do is they go into high schools and now middle schools and teach our lessons. And so here are Black Muslims teaching white Italian kids our lessons. And they're really accepted really well because they're unique. I mean, in many other countries, you almost never see Black people. But now that they have all this information and they know how to deliver it. And the other part of the story is for each lesson they give, we give them, let's say 50 euros, half of which they have to send home. And so now their parents are overjoyed because instead of their children abandoning them, they are helping to support them. So it's such a wonderful win-win situation that is, I know obviously everything is stopped because there's no schooling, but we hope when it continues that we have pictures of it. We hope to now make some videos of it that we can share with many other people.
That's great. Scott, your background's in leadership. What are you seeing with national leaders and possibly other leaders that is impressing you? I know there's been a lot of unimpressive leadership, and it seems like people are trying to get elected again, somehow ignoring the humanitarian crisis. What are some examples where you've seen some good leadership?
Matt, am I able to share a document on this right now? Do I have that capability to share a document?
You can certainly try.
I don't think it's allowing me to share my screen, but that's okay.
I think you can.
Usually you can, but they've been rolling out some restrictions in the last.
It says that the host has disabled screen sharing, but that's okay. I'm looking at leadership and lack of leadership the same way you are, Matt. There are the heroes, the heroic leaders who respect science, who respect the epidemiologists, who respect the models of disease spread and social distancing, and who are very early to the game of separating people and keeping people at home. And then there are the not so heroic leaders who have been late in imposing much needed restrictions on human contact. There are the heroes who lead by example, and then there are the leaders who, like Trump, who says, "I will not wear a mask." He's not going to lead by example. He's above the mask, but he wants everyone else to wear the mask. And then we have leaders like Captain Brett Crozier, the whistleblower hero who was fired because he was telling the truth about the catastrophe happening in the military. So you have the leaders who are doing the right thing by whistleblowing when the truth needs to be told. And you've got the not so good leaders who are then firing and dismissing those punishing those whistleblowers.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have other examples too, but those are the first things that come to mind.
Scott, have you got a link to the document that you were going to share that you could put into the chat?
I can certainly try to do that.
Okay.
Great.
Elaine, are you seeing anything stand out so far with what you're hearing from the frontline workers?
So we're doing survey data so far, so I haven't looked at any of the data yet.
Okay.
But what we're doing with people is we're doing survey around their well-being, different coping strategies, and we're going to follow up with them every 2 weeks once they complete the baseline data collection. So it'll be 20 minutes for the first survey and then just 5 minutes for each repeat. But we've also given them the opportunity, because one thing I am hearing is that a lot of them want to get their voices heard, and they have a lot to say, and people are really struggling. So we're giving people the option of doing face-to-face or telephone interviews. So we're hoping that we can really capture some of that information qualitatively.
And a lot of your research has been on people's perceptions of heroes and the attributes of them. What do people need from potential heroes that they could be looking for, or people could be providing in these times?
So I think we're all feeling threatened in different ways, whether we're really, putting that kind of a label on it. Certainly physical threats, obviously, of the virus, but also things like our sense of belonging with other people has been interrupted. So we have this threat of isolation, which is, we're human beings, we're designed to live together. Well, lockdown then is another kind of sense of belonging that might be slightly different for people. But I mean, in terms of our wider circles and interacting with our colleagues and our friends and participating in social activities, that's all been stopped. So I think our sense of belonging is threatened. Also, there's a lot of uncertainty. Here, there's been a large volume of fake news throughout since the start of this virus. So as well as the threat of the virus plus the fake news, plus in a lot of cases, lack of leadership. I think people are feeling really uncertain. They're not sure who to turn to or what information to trust. So I think there's some key, I suppose, psychological needs that are being threatened. And Heroes sort of counter some of those. Heroes are providing us many leaders. I know in Canada, some of the health professionals, I think each state has a designated health leader, and they seem to have really stepped up to the forefront, providing clarity, providing evidence-based information, a trusted source of information that people are really turning to and celebrating as heroic, because they're providing informative information. They're providing this clarity and certainty during this time of uncertainty. There's been lots of grassroots action here, as well as more top-down heroic action. So we have the call, community call here, which is anybody can sign up, whether they're feeling that they need to connect with somebody because they need help, or people who have time on their hands and can actually volunteer to help other people in their community. So I think that's a really nice example of heroism in action in terms of trying to connect people. Also here, over 70,000 people have signed up to volunteer for the health service. Some of them have medical training, some of them don't, but people have put their name on this list to say, you know, I'm willing to help over the next few months. So we're seeing lots of examples of heroes, I suppose, coming to the forefront in different capacities, but most of them are meeting some of these psychological needs that are threatened.
Right.
Also, a lot of us some people have obviously lost their jobs. Some people are working in different capacities. So I suppose our day-to-day structure, our routine, our sense of meaning and purpose, all those kind of factors have been threatened. And we know from a lot of the research that heroes are vehicles of meaning, and they can enhance people's sense of meaning and purpose in life. So I think we're turning to heroes in order to provide us with some kind of meaning and purpose and clarity.
Right. Mariana, we've got a question for you from the audience, from Diane. How do you cope with the stress when you're working with refugees? Do you get support from your organization to help with your mental health when you're working in those stressful situations, or are you doing that yourself?
Actually, when we began this NGO, we were also doing it from the start, and at first we weren't doing that with the volunteers, and so we were not doing any follow-up after the volunteers came and were there with us. So we were giving training before they go to the camps, and when we were daily with them, we will try to figure out how was their mental state and well-being. And one very important thing, for example, when you are in these situations, we're always telling the volunteers that they need to sleep well and you know, also take care of themselves, and also we were always saying to them, if you feel you are doing something and if you feel you should stop, you are in the middle of an activity but you really feel, okay, I need a break, please do it, because it's really overwhelming, and so you really have to be very very aware of how is your well-being, because unless you don't do that, you will be very easily go into burnout, and then you won't be there doing anything. But then we were not doing anything in the concerning like follow-up after the volunteers were there, and then we start feeling that that would be very important also. So we started implementing, when the volunteers would come back to Portugal, to have moments with them independently. So some of the volunteers would seem very fine at first, but we will do it to all the volunteers during some weeks after they were in the camps. we will do some sessions, not like psychotherapy sessions, but we will be with them to check how they were, because some of them will arrive from the camps and in the days after be very bad, but some of them were very okay, and then after some months they start with the memories of the experience, and then having some PTSD, etc.
Yeah. Phil, I want to transition to you there just to get some advice for people that might be watching about the current situation, and Christy's worried about the negative mental health that can come from all of this, from the isolation, from the fear. What can people be doing over the next few months for themselves, apart from reaching out for mental health support, which in Australia has been made available and free for everyone through phone or computer? But how can we keep ourselves together? I suppose Mariana just said, making sure that you're attentive to your mind and making sure you're getting sleep. But how else can we work on that?
Yeah, it's. I think it's especially difficult for people who live alone, and there are hundreds of thousands of them everywhere. So so I've made little videos that I've sent to Iran and Hungary and other places. And one of the things I say, it's really critical, first of all, to exercise your body. 10 minutes a day doing stretching, whatever. Ideally, if you have any kind of bike but any kind of exercise, that's really critical. And then again, it's doing some positive things like cleaning up old files, cooking. If you have food in your house, making some special meal that usually takes a long time that you don't have time to do. And then now the big problem is families that have lots of young kids at home, and surprisingly, many game makers have stepped up to the plate, and they're making new, interesting games. Now, I've been a critic of gamers, because essentially most of the games before were violent, and also because many teenage boys got addicted to them. In fact, I wrote a book called Man Disconnected. But now this is very different. These are cooperative games, constructive games, games that you could play cooperatively, which is one of the things I've always been saying. So that would be good to find out what. I don't know the link to them, but if we could find out the link to that, that would be good. But also doing things like writing poetry, something that you might never do. And the other really important thing, and this is I made a commitment, is to learn a new language. Okay. And one of the programs, I don't know if it's in Europe, but here it's called Babbel, and it's very inexpensive. I think they even have some free lessons, and they have like 30 different languages. So using this time to do something that you've always wanted to do, but just in quote never had the time to do it. Now you got the time. So although I'm Italian, I'm really bad in languages. I have a bad E. I can't reproduce. So I have committed myself to learn Italian finally.
That's great advice. And I saw your question, Phil, about whether nonprofits are going to get financial support again. And I wanted to throw it sort of related to what I wanted to ask Elaine. You were talking about, or maybe it was Scott was talking about the frontline people are super appreciated now. Do you get the sense that in 6 months' time, when things calm down or have calmed down, that's going to be remembered? Have we got historical parallels where the social construct has maybe been thrown off its loop and stayed that way? Or are we going to be back to big business frantically trying to grab all the money back again?
It's funny that you should mention 6 months, because I have a firefighter friend who said that in the 6 months following 9/11, everywhere he went, people treated him to lunch, treated him to coffee, patted him on the back, said thank you. And then after 6 months, all of that respect and admiration ended and hasn't been the same since. But this may be different because this pandemic is not going away in 6 months. I think our society is going to be changed fundamentally as a result of the long-term impact that this virus is going to have. It may be with us for years, and that's a bad thing, obviously. But if there's any good to come from it, it is that we will now have a more longer-term respect for the people who keep us alive, who are there for us to maintain our safety and security and protection.
Elaine,
Yeah.
do you get that sense as well?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that people seem to be so aware that this is such a monumental historical episode. It's not even an event, it's just an episode that's going to go on for some time, that people are really trying to capture it. Like I've got sent, is it called the COVID-19 time capsule for children? It's like a workbook for working through with young children to try to put some sense into what's happening, so that this idea that in the future they will be able to return to it. I've seen lots of posts on Facebook where people are saying, this is what's happening in my life right now. And it's lots and lots of information about the shops and the greater context and what they can and can't do and the restrictions and who's there and who's not. And so it seems to be, we seem to have this kind of meta awareness that this is a crazy time, but we may forget it in the future if we don't take the time to really document it carefully now. And I've seen a post, we have a platform here called RT Brainstorm, which is a collaboration between the mainstream media and academics. And there was a really nice post quite recently by a historian helping to kind of give ideas about how we might go about documenting this history that we're living through now, because we have the benefit of hindsight, and we have technology, and we have access to academics who can inform us what to do and how best to remember it. But I agree, society is going to change fundamentally, and hopefully some good does come out of it, but obviously there's a lot of collateral damage as well in terms of the economic impact.
Is there a link to the workbook?
Yeah, I'll have a quick look.
Yeah, if you could put that in the chat, that'd be great. My kid's been writing a COVID diary for the last week, just writing her thoughts and reflections and reporting what's happening. So it'll be interesting to see, that documentation.
I'm concerned, about all the people who do not have access to the internet. There's so many good resources now on the internet, and also people are using Facebook and Instagram to communicate, more than ever. But there's many people, certainly people in the older generation, people with less educated, who never ever have used the internet, who can't even afford having a home computer. And I just worry about them, that they have to feel left out, and anxious and uncertain.
Yeah, Andrea and Christy were just mentioning that in the comments too. So in particular, it's coming, or not in particular, but it's certainly coming out in the schooling as well, where the sort of general assumption is that everyone has ability to get online and do their work. Right. I want to sort of finish up in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So Mariano, have you got, what are the plans going forward for your work outside of what's happening right now? What are the plans with Heroic Imagination and the teenagers that you're working with? What are you hoping to do in Portugal?
So right now we are very enthusiastic, more with this project that we are doing with the little kids, the ones with 8 and 9 years old, because it was really and we did it in Porto, but the National Red Cross, they became very interested, because I think it really works, because we are just doing sessions on Heroic Imagination, and so we are creating these awareness that you should you shouldn't be a bystander, and you know, so these kids getting to know what leads to bystander behavior, and try to promote this sociocentric attitude. And then with the psychological first aid that the Red Cross teaches, they understand, okay, so I shouldn't be a bystander, and then what should I do when I am in the situation? And so the first psychological first aid, they learn these basic steps of doing it. So it really worked very fine. We were very lucky because we administrated the post test in the week before the quarantine became here in Portugal. So we were able to finish the study. We will now entering the data and see what results we have, and of course I will share with you.
Fantastic.
And we will. So what we would like now is to follow the same kids. So we would like to do it in a longitudinal basis, and so continue. It's 7 classes of kids. So it's we I don't know if we have a team big enough to do it with all the 7 classes, but at least with some, we would like to continue with these kids, so that in the future they will like be these like train younger kids, you know. So keep doing something on promoting these heroes clubs, etc., with these kids, and then for them to do sessions with younger kids. So that's the dream. Let's see how it goes.
That's great. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of this comment Diane just made about hospitals and ICUs are asking for iPads and iPhones so that they can FaceTime with their family because of that technology gap. So if you've got any old technology that hospitals could have, that might be a great thing to do. Scott, what's next on board for you?
Well, I'm teaching my classes over Zoom and try to keep observing. I think right now we're witnessing something that none of us have seen in our lifetimes. We're in uncharted territory, which is why I think what Phil said about self-care, being gentle with ourselves, is so crucial, because I think we're all under a lot of stress. And I think my goal right now is to get through my teaching and to comfort and encourage my friends who are freaking out. I've got a lot of friends who have anxiety disorders, and they need someone just to talk to. And they need a kind word, they need reassurance, and they just need someone to listen to. I really think listening to people, just being there for people, is a highly underrated skill and virtue that we all could benefit from doing. Just being there for people, listening, comforting, and helping people get through this, because here in the US, the worst is yet to come. We're still, we've not flattened the curve. They think maybe in another month, we might be at the peak and ready to start getting better. So we got a long way to go, and I think we have to step up and help people in any way we can.
I think that thing about listening to people it's even harder at the moment, right? Because we need help being listened to as well. It's hard to be it's hard to be a good listener because we're all stressed as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Elaine,
what things if I can?
Yeah.
Just today, the economist Paul Samuelson said he has avoided using the term economic depression, but he thinks now that he's predicting that there will be a depression. I've been saying for weeks that there will be a global economic crash that will destroy many smaller nations around the world that will never recover from it. America, other countries have many things in place that they will recover in some months. You know, but in some place in Asia, in Africa, in South America, my sense is that there will never be a recovery. That'll be a global economic pandemic that nobody's talking about. I'm not even sure what you can have. He can even plan for it. The other positive thing is I really should take my lessons now, reduce them to a 50-minute, and figure a way to put them online. So for all the kids who are at home with nothing to do or homeschooling, I don't know how to do that. So how, Matt, how can I get help in, you know, just taking any one of the lessons? We can start with the bystander one and boil it down to, you know, a 50-minute lesson, and then put it, and then how to put it online so that, and then how to advertise that it's there.
Yeah, I can help with that for sure. We can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would be a good, valuable thing that the Heroic Imagination Project could do.
For sure.
And of course, put it online for free.
Yeah. So any other questions from the audience while I ask Elaine to kind of finish up with what she's working on or hoping for next? Obviously, you're currently working on this stuff. Is there anything that people here could help with? Is it you're looking for people from the UK to self-nominate?
So UK and Ireland, yeah. So I put the link up there a little bit earlier. So it's cv19heroes.com. So we have a Facebook page and a Twitter group. So we're just trying to recruit as many frontline workers as possible. So we're predominantly looking for people who are, I suppose, out in the community in some kind of face-to-face capacity. We have had a few online workers, which isn't really what we're looking for, but so as many people are out in the community as possible. I suppose one thing I've been wondering, so there's been lots of people who've been labelled as heroes, obviously in the media, constantly, in lots and lots of conversations. And I just wonder whether any of the other speakers think that there could be potentially a negative impact of that for some people, where people are actually burning out and feeling that their resources are drained, and whether this idea of labelling them as heroes is actually making them feel that they can't give up, or that they can't step down, or they can't accept help because people are relying on them so much. It's just one thing that's come up for me in the past couple of weeks.
I've been wondering that too, seeing especially medical people going into work without the proper PPE and yeah, what that pressure is, especially when yeah, it's all NHS workers are heroes, or all nurses are heroes, that we're just maybe adding the pressure to them to make the right decision for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
What about Scott and Phil and Mariana? What's your sense on that?
Well, Christy Nichols, oh, I'm sorry. Christy Nichols has an important item. She's a high school teacher. She wants to know how she can help in the mental health education sphere. So again, in general, if somebody says, I have a skill, you know, how do I get it out to the world that I'm available, not to everybody, but I'm available to people in Queens, New York. I'm available to people in San Francisco. That, you know, I don't know how to do it. I mean, and I'm fairly well educated. So what should we tell Christy?
I think it's when it's one person offering help, I think your best way to get it out is to put it out to your network and then the expanded network. If you try to go too broad, you're going to get overwhelmed pretty quickly, I think. And I'd say Mariana's experience is probably like that as well. There's so many refugees that need help. You can't help them all. You've got to limit the audience a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to get off the call. I've got another one coming in 10 minutes with some ex-high schoolers from Hero Roundtable. So thank you all for being here. Elaine, Phil, Scott, Mariana, and everyone who was watching. Really appreciate it.
And thanks for doing this, Matt. It's really
Thanks for organizing.
Creative
Thank
idea.
you, Matt.
Thanks,
everyone.
I'm excited everyone could make it. Thanks a lot.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lovely
Bye,
to see
Mariana.
everybody.
Everybody.
Take care and stay safe.
Bye.